What makes something considered indie animation? I'm sure many of you are thinking to yourself, of course I know what indie animation is. And I was in the same boat as well and thought the same things, until I actually started to really dive deep into what indie animation really means. Why indie animation even exists as a genre, if you can even call it that. And then also come to the conclusion on how the title of indie animated can potentially lose some meaning or value as time goes on. So to really find out what indie animated really means, of course, we can just look it up, because in the modern age you can just pull out the little square you have in your pocket probably and just Google it on the definition of indie animation. And this definition, taken from Wikipedia, which I am using as a credible source because I am not a high school teacher, says, quote, "The terms independent animation or indie animation refers to animated shorts, web series, or feature films produced outside a major national animation industry." This definition is a pretty good one. I mean, it encompasses everything I pretty much talk about on this channel relating to indie animation, and honestly gives a pretty satisfying answer. At least to most people. See, I was thinking through this entire concept in general in the middle of the night, 2 a.m. with nothing better to do or anything to really wake up to. Like, it's the summer, it's not like there's school or anything. Not yet, at least. So of course, I couldn't just take this very simple and very complete answer, I had to keep thinking. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos talking about indie animation and its definition, of course not being the main focus of the video, but still necessary to understand it. And every time they explain it, sometimes they mention how indie animated series are mostly independently funded. These sources of income include fundraisers like Kickstarters or anything else of the sort, merch sales if they're able to even make merch in the first place, and the very small amount of money you get from YouTube ad revenue, at least in the grand scheme of things. There are also plenty of miscellaneous ways to earn money or gain money to fund indie animated shows or series in general that I didn't mention, but there's so many of them that I could think of, and probably way more that I haven't even thought of, so I'm just not gonna even bother naming all of them. These are all ways, varying in difficulty to do, to get enough money to animate or just finish your series in general. Because, shocker, animating or just making a series in general, or a TV show, a movie, whatever, takes a lot of money. To put in perspective, a while ago, Glitch Productions, or at least the head of Glitch Productions, Luke and Kevin, whose last names I do not feel like pronouncing again, stated that one Murder Drones episode took $350,000 to $450,000 USD. Now, although this number can be a little bit outdated, especially with their level of animation, and also considering the fact that they are a relatively big company, at least when it comes to indie animated stuff, it is still a way you can look at indie animation and how much money they cost. So maybe the definition we found on Wikipedia is, again, a very good definition of what indie animation is, but we can also add on the fact that it is independently funded as well. So we have our definition. The terms indie animation or independent animation refers to animated shorts, web series, and feature films produced outside a major national animation industry and are also independently funded. This is a great definition. If it weren't for the fact that it would classify Glitch Productions, arguably the poster child of indie animation, as not indie animation. Because the part we just added on, the part where we add independently funded, doesn't apply to Glitch Productions anymore. Because unless you've been living under a rock recently, I'm pretty sure you've heard of the Amazon deal that Glitch Productions made. To either refresh your memory or give you a quick summary of what this deal entices, Glitch Productions made a deal with Amazon to put all of their shows on Prime Video. Those to come, and also those that have passed, such as Murder Drones or maybe even the Gaslight District once the full season comes out. The Amazing Digital Circus would be on there, but it's on Netflix right now as I'm making this video, and there's still like something going on. It's not really known what's going on with that, but for the majority of their shows, Glitch Productions has a lot of them on Prime Video. Of course, this doesn't come without a cost for Amazon, as they are currently paying Glitch Productions to help fund their shows in order to have their shows that they put out not only still on YouTube, but also on Prime Video in general. So technically, via very little technicality, Glitch Productions is getting non-independent funding, and if we were to use our definition we just came up with a little bit earlier, it would make Glitch Productions, again, basically the poster child of indie animation, not part of indie animation. So clearly this definition isn't going to work, because we all agree that Glitch Productions is indie animation, or at least creates indie animated shows. Okay, I know what I'm about to say probably is going to sound crazy and really stupid, but you just gotta hear me out just a little bit for like 3 more minutes. The co-owners of Glitch Productions as a company, Luke and Kevin, again not pronouncing their last name, also happening to be brothers, have created their own shows, along with like an entire series and multiverse and whatever in SMG4. They've created Meta Runners, Sunset Paradise, and oh yeah, that's kind of just it. However, their next 3 shows, being Murder Drones, The Amazing Digital Circus, and The Gaslight District, were all written and directed by different people, being Liam Vickers, Gooseworks, and Part-Time Seagull. All 3 of these very talented individuals were never part of Glitch Productions in the first place. They were reached out to, or they reached out to Glitch Productions, and both Glitch Productions and that person agreed to start making a show. And with Liam Vickers being the only one of these 3 individuals whose show is complete, we can see that he's basically, I'm pretty sure, left the company. Sure, there are still merch drops going on, and there's the whole comic book, which I'm pretty sure he is uninvolved with, so it is safe to say that he is pretty much parted ways with Glitch Productions, obviously with good terms and everything, and there's no doubt that there is a possibility, not saying that there's going to be, but a possibility that he could go back. Currently, he is gone from the studio or company. And where am I going with all of this? Well, if you look at it in a certain way, these 3 people who were completely uninvolved in the company then went to the company, were kind of hired to create a show, they were given funding, and are either currently making their show or have already made their show and then have moved on. This sounds kind of similar to how you would approach a bigger company, maybe not in the indie animation space, basically pitch your show, which no doubt these 3 people definitely did to Glitch Productions, get the green light, produce your show, get funding from that studio, and then create your show, and then most likely leave. Basically what I'm hinting at is that if you look at it at a certain angle, and if you've hit yourself in the head multiple times, you can kind of see how some people could say that in a way, some of Glitch Productions' most famous shows could be considered technically by definition not indie animation. Now, you could say that this is stupid, and it is stupid. Murder Drones, The Amazing Digital Circus, The Gaslight District, those are all indie animation. I mean, hell, Glitch Productions themselves say that they are, as a company, independent and create independent animated shows. This just means that our definition of indie animation is just wrong, and we need to find a new one. Now, the Wikipedia definition could work, but then you need to draw the line to where a company is too small and is still considered independent, or too big and considered a major national animation industry. Now, of course, something like Disney is very easy to define as, a major national animation industry, but Glitch Productions is also pretty large. I mean, the numbers that they pull are sometimes even more than some very large budget movies made in pretty recent time. So what is the definition of indie animation? What makes something indie animated or be able to be classified as indie animation? Well, let me give you a little bit of a lesson. And also, let's be clear, I am not educated in the sphere of animation or just the business industry in general. I am a high school student, so just take everything I say with a grain of salt because I've learned this basically just from interviews and stuff that I've read about online. Corporate meddling, that thing that you hear about that causes all of the problems that you see in TV shows or movies. Let's pretend that you're trying to make a TV show about a girl who goes through a journey of self-discovery and trying to find the definition of humanity or something. However, the studio that you are borrowing money from to create that show, since they are the ones funding it and pouring money into this project, they made it so that they have the power to change anything within the story that they think isn't going to contribute well to the overall performance of this show. And so they ask you, or more like force you, with the threat of withdrawing the financial aid that they're giving you to create this show, to change some aspects of the show. Let's say make the lead female character basically a perfect person and never have to go through any struggle. This obviously makes it so that the original writer, the person who came to the studio with this idea, the image of this story that they had now has to be changed in order for it to even be released into the public at all. Or there's a second option, which is made possible with sites like YouTube and fundraisers like Kickstarter, to do it themselves, to get the money themselves, and to create the show only with themselves. There's also the stories about how shows are screwed over by the executives that reach people who were planning on trying to make their own series, and instead of going to a big company like Disney or some other company, try to make it themselves and post it to YouTube or something. These ways, along with probably many other ways that I just haven't mentioned, are how some indie animated shows are created. So what makes something indie animation? What defines something as being indie animated? Well, although this answer may be a little bit unsatisfactory, it honestly doesn't really matter. In the end, indie animation was made in the first place entirely because people wanted to tell the stories they wanted without any restrictions. Regardless whether it's made by a few animators living in someone's basement, or if it's made by a big mega corporation, as long as the story is good and also, made humanely and stuff, it doesn't matter whether it's considered indie animation or not. Obviously, a beautifully choreographed fight scene made by just one guy with a laptop is going to be more impressive than beautiful animation from a big mega corporation. Doesn't mean that you should favor one thing over the other just because of the title it gets. Perhaps I also have a bias towards indie animation over movies that are created by companies and released in theaters, but that isn't because one has a title of indie animation and the other doesn't. It's because one of them is free and the other one is locked behind movie tickets that are so goddamn fucking expensive. In the end, we're all just trying to find something to watch and enjoy, whether it be booting up YouTube and going to Glitch Productions' channel, or trying to scrape around the few coins you have in your wallet to try to buy a movie ticket. As long as it's good, well written, and enjoyable to watch, it doesn't really matter what label is put on it, that being indie animation or anything else of the sort.